things keep on changing. Life goes on and on and on and on and on.
Hi, so our given topic is all about the principles of good governance. So before we discuss the principles of good governance, we need to know first what is good governance. So good governance is an approach to government that is committed to creating a system founded in justice and peace that protects our individual human rights and civil liberties. So here is the 5 principles of good governance.
Good governance has a 5 principles. Number 1 is the legitimacy and voice. Legitimacy means where all the men and women have a say in decision and about what is the best interest of the community or groups. Legitimacy and voice has 2 parts. Number 1 is participation and number 2 is consensus-oriented. Participation, also known as citizen participation or patient and public involvement, is the conclusion of the public in the activities of any organization or project. The principle of public participation holds that those who are affected by a decision have a right to be involved in the decision-making process. Example of participations are voting, volunteering, participating group activities, and community gardening. The second part of legitimacy and voice is consensus-oriented. Consensus-oriented means demonstrated by an agenda that seeks to mediate between the many different needs, perspectives, and expectation of the diversity citizenry. Decision needs to be made a manner that reflects a deep understanding of the historical, cultural, and social context of the community.
Good day everyone, my name is Mary Joyce Chapaladoton and I am going to report about the 5 principles of good governance. Direction. Strategic vision. Leaders and the general public have a broad and long-term view of good governance and human development, as well as an understanding of what is required for such development. There is also an understanding of the historical, cultural, and social complexities that underpin that perspective. Thank you.
Overall, performance is the ability of a company to generate maximum commercial profitability from the material and the human resources at its disposal. I will be discussing to you one of the principles of good governance, which is performance. So what is performance? Performance is the one who make it possible to evaluate and enhance the effectiveness and efficiency of a service. Performance also facilitates better assuring delivery of outcomes consistent with the organization's objectives, including appropriate managing organizational risk. Performance has 2 components. The first one is responsiveness. Institutions and processes try to serve all stakeholders. The second one is effectiveness and efficiency. Processes and institutions produce results that meet needs while making the best use of resources.
I'm Vernalisa Holaton and I'm going to discuss the 4th principle in good governance. The 4th principle of good governance is the accountability. First, let us define the accountability according to Merriam-Webster. First, it is the quality or state of being accountable. Second, this is particularly relevant to public officials like ourselves. That term could also refer to the obligation or willingness to accept. The 4th principle of good governance is based on accountability itself and transparency. First, let's talk about the accountability. Decision makers in government, the private sector, and civil society organizations are accountable to the public as well as to institutional stakeholders. This accountability differs depending on the organization and whether the decision is internal or external. Accountability basically plays a critical role in fostering good governance as part of increasing public trust in government performance. Accountability is essential in assessing the ongoing effectiveness of public officials or authorities to make sure that they are performing to their full potential, providing value for money, establishing trust in the government, and being responsive to the community. For example, conservatives emphasize on anti-corruption and the rule of law is easily aligned with accountability. Simultaneously, it just left-wing developmentalists who stress the significance of making government more responsive to underprivileged and marginalized populations. Is transparency. Transparency is built on the free flow of information processes, institutions, and information are directly accessible to those concerned with them, and enough information is provided to understand and monitor them. Transparency is defined as allowing internal and external forces of governance to inquire into, have access to, and influence governance operation in some level. Citizens will be able to detect whether political leaders are going wrong due to strong government transparency, and they will be able to apply targeted pressure to get them back on track. Increased public participation in local and national governance processes will give such institutions with direct advice on how to best respond to citizen needs, as well as extra info regarding roadblocks and inefficiencies. Transparency implies that decisions are made and enforced in accordance with rules and regulations. It also implies that information is freely available and easily accessible to those who will be impacted by such decisions and their implementation. Transparency can include campaign finance disclosure so voters can see if candidates are associated with non-governmental organizations, prudent disclosure from governments and their ability to request government records. So, transparency encompasses accountability as a concept. It is assumed to operate in a continuous environment for increased accountability. Transparency's success is determined by the level of accountability it provides to government employees. Transparency is a term used to describe the process of exposing government and governance to the public and encouraging more citizens' participation. Transparency and accountability require one another and can reinforce one another. Together, they give citizens a voice on issues that are important to them, as well as the opportunity to influence decision-making and hold those making decisions accountable. Each concept is a component of a strategy for and by citizens to have the means, resources, and opportunities to influence decision-making and affect development outcomes.
The fifth principle is fairness. Fairness means treating people with equality. It entails avoiding of bias towards one or more entities as compared to others. For example, for whatever shareholdings they have, all shareholders should be treated equally. In addition to shareholders, all stakeholders, including employees, communities, and government officials, should be treated fairly. In fairness, there are equity and rule of law. In equity, all men and women have opportunities to improve or maintain their well-being. All should have opportunity to enjoy the benefits derivable from government. It means giving an open door to all and treating all equally. Next, the rule of law. Under the rule of law, citizens can live and work safely. They will not be subjected to arbitrary government and are protected against any abuse of power by the state. That means legal framework should be fair and enforced impartially, particularly the laws on human rights. Both the government and citizens know the law and obey it.
Why principles of good governance are very important. So, principles of good governance encourage the public workers or public managers to go beyond the limitations of thinking only in legal terms. So, the legal implications of an action are critical of any decisions, but they are also well defined, easy to determine, and simple to apply. So before we end our presentation, let's recall the 5 principles of good governance. So first, we have the legitimacy and voice with 2 factors, the participation and consensus orientation. Next principle, we have the direction with 1 factor, the strategic vision. Next, we have the performance with 1 factor, the responsive. Fourth principle, we have the accountability with 2 factors, the accountability and transparency. Fifth principle, we have the fairness with 2 factors also, the equity and the rule of law. That's the end of our presentation. Thank you so much. Keep safe and God bless you all.